Greetings and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Brent Adams, joined by a man who had already pledged to kill every Nazi on Earth before your little video light games made it cool. Mr. Lauren Baumgarten! Lauren!
That is a goddamn true story.
Yes, indeed.
I still do it, Brent. I don't know if you know this, but that's actually I have a day job and I have a weekend job, but my night job is hunting Nazis.
That's exactly right, and we're actually in the process of developing a television series called My Night Job, and it's just about
Nazi hunter.
That's right, My Night Job Nazi hunter, going out and ridding the world of Nazi scum. And you think like, oh, I mean, how long could that last? You know, because there's so little Nazi scum in the world. Turns out not so much.
Welcome to the show, Brent. How are you, sir?
Why, thank you, sir. I'm doing great, man. It's been a great week. It's been a productive week in terms of video games, and
that's what I like to hear.
I'm excited to talk about that very much.
Yes, indeed.
As we get into the bottom half of the show.
Before we get into it, Brent, I feel like we should do something that you and I have been meaning to do for 12 weeks, Brent. 12 episodes.
You're absolutely right, and we're very remiss to do so.
It's true. You and I have been talking about thanking.
We need to thank people.
Thanking our listeners for their contributions to the club treasury.
Yeah,
we wanted to talk about this since we transitioned over from EBA to OutlawGamers.com.
We just haven't done it. And we suck, and we're sorry. You know who doesn't suck? You guys. You guys don't suck. So I guess, obviously, we're all here. We used to be over at Epic Battle Axe, and now we're here at Outlaw Gamers. And the reason that is the case, the reason that our community didn't just fracture and go their separate ways when EBA ended is because you guys made sure that it didn't happen. And we want to thank each and every one of you who believed in this community enough to make sure that it kept going, and so very generously donated your money. Many of you donated your time in other ways to help us make the transition and to rise from the ashes as strong as ever under the moniker of Outlaw Gamer Society. And we cannot thank you enough. Those of you who have been donating to the club treasury, little amounts every month to make sure that we can run the website, make sure that we can get the show out to you, and all of that stuff. We cannot thank you enough. This community is driven by you guys, and we are going to keep rolling until you guys decide that the wheels are going to come off. And based on the enthusiasm and support that we've seen, not only from the monthly donors, but also from some really, really fantastic very generous one-time donations when we transitioned over to see some of those people, putting down, their dollars so that we could make this happen. It's incredibly gratifying, and it's very humbling. And Lauren and I, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you guys allow us to do this every week, and it's just the most amazing. It's the most amazing thing ever. When people talk about toxic game communities and all that stuff, I laugh to myself because we are on the far, far opposite end of that scale, and I'm reminded every time of how amazing the people who make up our community and our website are. So for myself, I'll let Lauren say his own piece, but for myself, thank you very, very much.
I don't know that I can say it any better than that, Brent, other than just thank you to everybody. As you said, Brent, I don't know if you know this, or we don't really talk about this very often, but coming up this October will be 5 years of doing this podcast together, which is pretty incredible to me. I can't believe it's been that long, and it's so thank you to you for that, but it's so much because of our listeners and the support of everybody. So we've been meaning to say it for 12 weeks, and we talk about it before almost every show, or actually I shouldn't say that. We talk about it after we record.
After every show.
We record every show and say, we forgot to do it. We got to do it next week. So just to thank you to everybody who's so generous to contribute to the club treasury. We really, really appreciate it. it. And so with that, we should probably give you some show to enjoy. And we have got a show this week. We have, what do we have? 6 items available in the garage this week.
Yeah, it's kind of 5.5, but
kind of 5.5. But we got some goodies, Brent. So the first one.
It's the kind of garage segment that's not going to be legal in New York City. That's how it rolls.
So I want to know what you think of this first one, Brent. So this first one is the official Batman Arkham Knight gameplay video, Officer Down. It's about 7.5 minutes of video.
Captured directly off a PS4, we are assured.
Captured directly off of a PS4. And Brent, I have to say, this is the first piece of Arkham Knight video that I've seen in quite some time that has gotten me more excited for the game as opposed to being more concerned for the game. What did you think?
Major dittos to you. I couldn't have put that better myself. That's exactly how I feel. And I would say that I think specifically the reason that this has been the first piece of media in a long time that's gotten me excited is this is the first piece of media in a long while that's felt familiar to me. It's the first thing I've seen in a while that has reminded me of what is so great about the Arkham series games and has seemed familiar as the Arkham City games. Now, I understand that they've shown gameplay before, and you can argue that, maybe that's hyperbole. Maybe I'm
no. This is the first one in a while that hasn't just shoved the Batmobile down your throat.
But yeah, this is the first thing where it's like you're flying around Gotham, using the zip line, using the cape. You're breaking up groups of bad guys. You are using the Batmobile, and I think that maybe that's one of the best things about this is that it shows how the Batmobile integrates into the normal flow of gameplay from the Arkham games. I think that's probably one of the better points of this. But you see a lot of familiar things, such as interrogation, such as combat, and you do see how the Batmobile works into that. You get a little taste of the story, and that's great and everything. But that is the thing that you just hit on that is so good about this is it feels familiar. It will wake up what is inside you that is excited about Arkham, the Arkham series, because it does bring that to life in an incredibly beautiful way, because graphically it's fantastic. I mean, it looks really, really nice, and that's something to get excited about too, I guess.
Indeed, it is. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and it is. Brent, I knew that this point was going to come. I mean, I had no sort of misgivings that I've been concerned about the videos we've been seeing, but I love the Batman Arkham games. I even loved Arkham Origins, which, a lot of people were disappointed in. Which a lot of people were disappointed in. I thought it was a great game. I just love the universe and the game. The game design is so brilliant that even a sort of a maybe not quite as good version of it is still pretty amazing. Yeah. Rocksteady is back on the cases, of course, for Arkham Knight, and it was Batman in all its glory, and it looked like Rocksteady, except that it kind of had the sort of artistic tenor of who did the last game? I forgot who did the last game already. It was
WB Montreal. Warner Brothers Montreal did Arkham Origins.
Okay, so but it's got sort of that artistic tenor of Arkham City. It's a little darker looking, and you're right. It showed how the Batmobile integrates seamlessly. It looked fantastic, and in 7 minutes, I am as excited for this game as I was, a year ago when it was supposed to come out. So simultaneously,
what do you think the chances are it gets delayed again?
Yeah, did we talk about this? It recently got delayed from June 6th out to June 23rd.
Yeah,
I would be surprised at this point if they delayed it by a couple weeks. I would be surprised at this point if it got delayed again, honestly. I think it's probably going to come out at the end of June. There's a lot of space around them at that time, and so I'm just super excited for it again.
I am too. No doubt about that. And I'm happy to be excited about it, seeing as how perhaps it's actually on track to come out, and I can allow myself to be excited in anticipation of playing it and then actually get to play it, as opposed to that fiasco that happened last time.
Indeed. All right, Brent. So next up is something I'm pretty excited about as well.
I can imagine.
Which I was completely and totally unaware of. I had no idea that Wolfenstein was getting DLC.
In this case, a pretty what looks to be a pretty freaking awesome DLC release.
It does. Wolfenstein: The Old Blood. The tagline for the DLC is "Before there was the New Order, there was the Old Blood," and that's all I know about it. I haven't done a ton of research on it. I have no idea what they're saying in terms of length. I do know it's $20. It comes out May 7th. I want to say something like that, early May. Didn't know anything about this. I'm super excited and will absolutely be picking it up. I actually started playing Wolfenstein again recently, started the game over, and it's just, I mean, it is just so good. Did you, I can't remember, did you finish Wolfenstein?
I didn't play the New Order. No, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't played it?
I haven't even started it. But the Old Blood looks really cool. I mean, it, in a sense, going back to Castle Wolfenstein, it invokes, of course, you know, the roots of the Wolfenstein series. I think it's also interesting to note that this is coming out, as you said, May 5th for $20, but you can buy through it and play it without owning a copy of the New Order. So,
it's a standalone expansion. I didn't realize that. Similar to the way
Blood Dragon
did it as well as Infamous 2.
Right. So I mean
Infamous Second Son, excuse me.
I'm a little bit more intrigued by this, given the fact that I don't have to own the New Order in order to play it.
Okay,
but anyway, the fact that I don't have to have the New Order to play it,
right, this can give you a way to jump in for 5-6 hours, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, hop into it. But anyway, I'm curious to know more and see more. But based on what we saw right here, it looks pretty cool.
I encourage you to check it out, man. I absolutely loved it. I was, Brent and I were talking about off air, sort of doing we both kind of want to do a postmortem, and we're talking about what to do it. I think, there's a good chance we'll do it for Batman. And sure. This is a great game, Brent. I highly encourage you to check out the Old Blood, and I think it might convince you to get the New Order. If it's anything like, what I like so much about the New Order is that it plays very much like the old school first person shooters, only with a nice new sheen and new coat on it, and the weaponry feels great, and it's just a fantastic game that walks that line between throwback and update better than almost any other game I've seen.
I'm happy for this thing to be my gateway drug, if that's how it works out.
Absolutely. All right, speaking of drugs, next up on our list is...
I don't understand that, but okay.
Now I don't want to... the only thing we have that's like Xbox specific, and now I'm going to sort of associate it with drug use, but Halo 5 Guardians...
That makes it cooler, though.
Halo 5 Guardians Spartan Lock ad was released recently, as well as the companion website Hunt the Truth, which is sort of a Halo 5's marketing...
It's their hashtag.
It's an actual website, and it's sort of their marketing. You can go and listen to. So it's kind of like, Far Cry 4 had a journalist who was supposedly traveling in Kirat and doing blog entries. This one is a journalist who's doing a story on Master Chief, and so they're releasing audio podcasts, and they released I think the first episode was about 12 minutes long. It's really interesting, but. So this trailer, the Spartan Lock trailer, came out for Halo 5 Guardians, and I gotta say, man, as much as I've not loved any single Halo game, I love the universe, and I'm so curious about, and this is actually pertains to what we were talking about last week with Hideo Kojima leaving Konami, and what people thought about the future of the franchise of Metal Gear Solid, and some people were excited to just see somebody else's take on the series, and I love the Halo universe. I've never connected completely with the games, but I love the lore, and so I'm really curious to see what 343 Industries does with Halo, and I thought this ad looked very cool.
I don't care.
Just don't care.
I don't. I'm not invested in the Halo mythology, which is what this ad really plays upon. Just turning things upside down with what's going on with Master Chief and all of that stuff. And I think that if you care about that, I think it's probably a great idea. It's a great idea to reinvigorate interest and put a really different spin on things. I'm not calling it out as being low quality or anything else of the sort, but it's just that since I'm not invested in Halo as a franchise, I don't really care about the mythology. I have to say that this had no impact on me whatsoever. It'd be like walking through the room as some show that's run for 7 seasons is having its series finale. It's like the last 4 minutes that this TV show will ever say anything new. And you walk through the room and you've never watched the show, and so what could be happening on screen is incredibly dramatic and moving and all that, and you just don't care because you have no investment in it. And that's how I feel about this.
So you didn't care when you found out that Walter White was actually Luke Skywalker's brother?
No.
This is, as I said, I find this interesting. I know that there's a lot of Xbox fans out there that are very excited about what's coming with the Halo franchise and maybe cautiously optimistically. So certainly, I don't think any single game would ever convince me to get a console. But this is an interesting one, and I'm hopeful that maybe someday they'll bring it to PC, although, of course, I'm very doubtful that would occur. But for our Xbox fans out there, I think you should definitely check this out. Now, for our PlayStation fans, Brent.
I was going to say, on the other side,
PlayStation released a new update 2.5, recently on March 26th, and it included something that they had actually they had actually implemented with the PlayStation Vita, and is such a brilliant mechanism. And I think Xbox is going to want to do this as well, and that is their suspend and resume function.
Yeah.
Where if you're in a game and you press and hold the PlayStation button and go into rest mode, it will actually suspend your game state. And I've done this. I've been doing this with Bloodborne, and it works just as it used to on the PlayStation Vita.
Yep.
So you go into rest mode. When you resume, when you turn on the PlayStation next time, and then you select your profile to get into it, and it will take you directly to the game exactly where you were. You don't need to pause the game when you do this. You literally just hit the PlayStation button and choose enter rest mode. Press and hold the PlayStation button, and it takes you right back. And it's absolutely brilliant. And it's such a great addition, dude. And I can't believe that everybody's not doing it. PC it's just brilliant. Yeah, I don't know what it takes technically, but
as you may or may not recall, back when we were doing our reaction show to the PlayStation 4 announcement event, this is one of the features that they talked about having on the PlayStation. They described this ability to have things suspended, and for your PlayStation 2, for all intents and purposes, powered down. It's in a low power rest mode. But to essentially power off your PlayStation, the next time you come back, you hit the button, it comes up, and you're right back in your game where you left off. And I told you, I said, I will use that all the time. That will maybe be the most useful thing that happens in this console generation, because as I famously pointed out, there's games I've got on PlayStation 3 where I've played the game for 300 hours, and it's just because I never turned off my PlayStation. I'd pause the game, I'd turn off the TV and just walk away and just let the PlayStation run for 4 days before I came back and started playing again while I was paused in game, because it just annoyed me enough to have to power up and go back through the process of continuing the game and everything. And I've been using this ever since it debuted in Shadow of Mordor, and it's fantastic. It's every bit as useful and awesome as we thought that it would be, and it's a great addition. I would love to see it become ubiquitous, as you just pointed out. I'll second that. I'll agree with you, rather than just act like I came up with that also myself. So I'll agree with Lauren.
Kudos to Sony for doing this. It's really a brilliant addition, and I think that anybody that doesn't do it now is a little bit behind. Really. All right,
who's not lame?
The last item or items in the garage, pertain to your friend and mine,
Mr. Ernie Klein.
Mr. Ernie Klein, friend of the show, friend to all Outlaw gamers everywhere. Yeah. Two big pieces of news regarding Ernie Klein this last week. I'll take the first one.
Go ahead.
And if you guys click on the link in the show notes, you'll see the tweet in which Ernie actually tweeted this out. It's pretty funny. And that was the announcement that none other than Steven, I'm not sure if it's Steven Spielberg or Steven Spielbergo.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure which one it is.
From The Simpsons. Steven Spielberg will be directing Ready Player One.
Holy shit. Just let that sink in for a second.
That's what Ernie said on Twitter, basically.
That's pretty fucking amazing right there. I mean, considering the fact, okay, number one, I think he's the most recognizable filmmaker, certainly of our generation. People can argue about, his, how good he is or whatever. I don't really care. But the point is that he is the highest profile director that I am aware of. I mean, prior to him, I don't know, maybe somebody like Stanley Kubrick or something. But, and not only is he this amazing high profile, obviously talented director, but so much of what is in Ready Player One, Spielberg's had a hand on, and now he's going to be doing the freaking movie. It's just incredible, man.
Yeah, I mean, just Google Steven Spielberg movies and you'll be astounded, like I am. Some of the most amazing movies, some of the greatest movies of all time. Goonies, of course, maybe the greatest movie of all time.
He produced that. That was Richard Donner directing.
That's true. Empire of the Sun is a brilliant film.
Yeah.
Of course, Indiana Jones, E.T., Schindler's List.
My favorite is still Jaws. I think pound for pound, Jaws is still the best
Jaws.
thing
I feel like I've heard of that. Jaws. What's it about?
What is it about? Let me tell you something else about this. This is a little bit more speculative, but as we talked about with Ernie the last time he was on the show, obviously there's a huge licensing problem to getting Ready Player One made because it utilizes all these properties that belong to other film studios.
Oh, and yeah.
I got to tell you that I feel as though I'm not telling you that everything that's in the novel is going to be there in the film. I think there's probably things that are going to fall by the wayside, but I have to say that with somebody like Spielberg, who has as much weight to throw around as he does, and somebody who has worked at every studio in town, I have to say that if Spielberg thinks it's important to get those things in the movie, I feel like he has the gravitas and the connections to make it happen. I feel like the film could be materially better with him directing than it might be with anybody else, because I feel like he can get some of those deals made and suddenly something, doing something like, okay, well, I'm going to go over to Disney and I'm going to get them on board so we can bring in Disney properties and Star Wars and Marvel stuff, and that'll infuse a lot of things into what we already have. I feel like he could potentially make that happen. So that could be false hope on my part, but that's just something that I've also been thinking about since this news broke.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. You make a very good point. So that's obviously that's huge news. We're super excited, and I cannot wait to see this movie come to fruition.
Me either.
And we have other news, Brent, for Ernie Klein.
That's right. If you're an Ernie Klein fan, it's a good time to be one, because Ernie's got a new book coming out. When? Soon. How soon? Very soon. July 14th is currently the listed release date for Ernie's new novel Armada, which is an interesting premise that also owes a little bit of something to video game culture. It's available for pre-order right now through Amazon, and I imagine some other places as well, but I know you can get it. I know you can get it through Amazon, Kindle edition, hardcover, and an audio CD. I desperately want to know who's going to be doing the audio version of the book. Here's a brief synopsis of Armada. Quote, "It's just another day of high school for Zach Lightman. He's daydreaming through another boring math class with just one more month to go until graduation and freedom." Sounds a little familiar. If he can make it that long with getting suspended again, then he glances out his classroom window and spots a flying saucer. At first, Zach thinks he's going crazy. A minute later, he's sure of it, because the UFO he's staring at is straight out of the video games he plays every night, a hugely popular online flight simulator called Armada, in which gamers just happen to be protecting the Earth from alien invaders. But what Zach's seeing is all too real, and his skills, as well as those of millions of gamers across the world, are going to be needed to save the Earth from what's about to befall it.
Sounds a little Last Starfighter.
Sounds a little Last Starfighter, but
which is a great movie.
But there's a little bit of a twist. There's a little bit of a twist, almost to acknowledge that. And the last paragraph says, "Yet even as he and his new comrades scramble to prepare for the alien onslaught, Zach can't help thinking of all the science fiction books, TV shows, and movies he grew up reading and watching, and wonder, doesn't something about this scenario seem a little too familiar?" So I suspect that the story's not going to be as straightforward as it might seem there. There's going to be some twists and turns and hooks.
Well, certainly Ernie is it's a conscious choice to align with The Last Starfighter, and so I'm very curious to see what his wink or nod is to that.
Yep, I can't wait to find out more. I've already pre-ordered the book, and I'm very eager to find out who's going to be doing the audiobook, because obviously the Ready Player One's a fantastic book. Don't get me wrong. I've read it and I've listened to it a number of times, and it's enjoyable no matter what. But I have to say that in my heart of hearts, I like listening to it more than I like reading it because it's so fun to listen to Will Wheaton's rendition of it.
Yep, I agree 100%. And I won't be pre-ordering the book until I will most likely get the audiobook, which is not available for pre-order. Alas, yes. So, yes, but I'm very, very excited about that. So just a short time away. So congratulations to Ernie on both of those things. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get him back on the show and talk to him a little bit about it, but we'll see. And until then, we'll just have to wait like everybody else.
I was going to say something else that we could do in the meantime, but I'm not going to now.
Probably a good idea. All right, guys, we have moved out of the garage and into the clubhouse. It is time to crack open some cold ones and sit down and talk for a little while about our subject this week. Before we do, Brent, you want to review the poll from last week?
I would love to. We were talking, of course, about the news that Hideo Kojima is leaving Konami and where that leaves fans of Kojima, fans of Metal Gear. We asked you guys, what's your take on Hideo Kojima leaving Konami? Here's how it shook loose. Last place, 22%. You said, I'm not a big fan of his myself, but I think this could be great for MGS. Second place, 28% of the vote. You said, I'm excited for both his next project and a new start for Metal Gear Solid. But the majority opinion with 51% was, I'm excited for whatever he does next, but a Metal Gear without him, not so much. So the Outlaw Gamer listening audience believes that whatever is great about Metal Gear has been Hideo Kojima's involvement. Skeptical is the vibe I'm getting. Skeptical about whether or not his absence will allow the series to continue.
Indeed. I will be curious, Brent, to see what the series does. I won't, I'll try not to prejudge, but understandable that people would be skeptical. So
sure.
Let's dive into this week's topic, Brent. This came from one of our readers or listeners. They actually posted a link to the IGN article.
Listen, it might be one of those listeners who can also read. Unlike the hosts of this show, I understand that our listening audience is actually okay with reading.
That's true. I'm sorry. I don't know. I was projecting my own inadequacies.
You and me both.
So one of our listeners posted a link to the IGN article about this subject. I did a little research, and I didn't think that the IGN article was robust enough, and I went to the source article, which was even surprisingly less robust, considering it came directly from the BBC. And ultimately, I ended up on the Guardian's website, and they had a little bit more information, a little bit more of a conversation about the topic. But I thought it was interesting, Brent. It kind of relates to some things we've talked about before. But I felt like this went to another level, and after reading it, I had some thoughts on it. So the article is titled, Head Teachers Threaten to Contact Police Over Children Playing 18-Rated Games.
Indeed.
So basically, in Cheshire, which is somewhere in the kingdom that is...
somewhere in the kingdom that is united.
Yes, somewhere in the United Kingdom. I'm not sure where, to be honest. My UK geography is not so good. But there's a school system. I kind of want to call it a school system. I'm not really clear on what it is, Brent. And I looked up. It's called Nantwich Education Partnership. It's a group of 15 primary schools and it's actually, I think, 14 primary schools and 2 secondary schools in Cheshire. I'm not 100% sure though if it's actually a school system. If you go to their website, it's kind of an odd website, and it looks like schools can opt in to the Nantwich Education Partnership. So I'm not
Couldn't
really
they have found
clear.
A better name? I mean, come
than
on.
Nantwich.
Nantwich sounds it's a little funky.
I'm not really clear. Not really clear on what that company does or what it is, but there's 16 schools that are affiliated with Nantwich, and basically they sent out a letter to parents saying that if we find out your kids are playing 18 plus games, and they cited specifically Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty as examples, that they were going to report them to the police, and that they might face potential neglect charges.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So here's now I'm going to go out on a limb here, Brent, and I'm going to guess that you're sort of philosophically opposed to this.
In every way you can imagine, I am opposed to this.
Understandable. So, as I would imagine, all of our listeners probably are. But what I thought was interesting, Brent, about this, other than number one, that it is a step further than I've seen most sort of entities go at this point, is also the fact sort of where it came from. And this is why I thought I linked to the Guardian's article, and I actually wish that the journalism still existed and somebody did a little bit more. There's a little bit more information. I really would have liked somebody to have delved into sort of what Nan-Twitch Education Partnership is, what their like sort of who their founders are and what their goal is, and what it means to be part of the Nan-Twitch Education Partnership, as opposed to maybe whether it's public or private. None of the articles I found on this from major publications, BBC, the Guardian, sort of like really delved into the company itself or system itself. But what I did think was interesting, though, and at least the Guardian talked about this a little bit, was sort of part of why they might be doing this, and this culture that's been created around in England lately. About, I guess, the Prime Minister announced recently that that people in positions of responsibility, such as teachers, firefighters, priests, police officers, who don't report neglect or abuse, are subject to a $5,000 fine. And so, in some of the,
go ahead.
What's that?
Go ahead. No.
In some of the back and forth in this article, there's some talk about like trying sort of understanding where this is coming from in the context of, being sure, that these people are sort of covering their own asses. You know what I mean? And it did get me thinking about the idea of like,
it's definitely not a way to create like a culture of fear and mistrust of, government and society. Definitely
no. I agree.
Definitely not going to do that.
Right. And they talk about that in this article. Although I did think it was interesting at what point. So if you knew, for example, if you were a teacher, and you knew that somebody's parents were showing them porno, I mean, is there any point at which you are sort of beholden to report that to somebody?
There's a difference between, and I don't know how the law works in the United Kingdom.
Well, not very well, obviously, which is why we broke away.
so there's a legal question.
Kidding.
There's a legal question that is implied there that may not be analogous to the situation with video games, but in the United States, it is illegal for an adult to show pornography to a minor. So in the example you just made, that
which changes my plans for the weekend.
That would be a crime. Yeah, it ought to, believe me. That would be a crime. And so, yes, you may very well have a legal obligation at that point to do something about it. However, a person who's 16 playing Call of Duty is not a crime. And so
certainly they do say in the article, Brent, that in the UK it is illegal for people under the age of 18 to buy those games, but it's not illegal for them to play them.
Correct. So if this were, if the thrust of this article were that these kids were playing these kids were playing underage games, and we're going after the retailers who sold them the games, then from a legal perspective, as still overreaching as it may be, as nanny state as it may be, within the law, they may have ground to stand on. But just as you long for the days of journalism, I long for the days of critical thinking. And my first question in all of this is, why is that a problem? If 16-year-olds are playing games for 18-year-olds, why is it a problem? And it's all based on, it all comes back to our old friend, violent video games are bad. And the tide is finally beginning to shift on that. People are finally beginning to recognize that scientific studies that have been made into this question are resoundingly coming to the conclusion that no, violent video games are not the huge, scary problem that politicians and opportunists in the 90s made them out to be. So if we as a culture, as a civilization, are waking up to that fact, then I don't understand what the big deal here is. If we know that violent video games don't lead to kids being violent, and we know that, then why is this an issue?
Yeah, so first of all, I think of it more in terms if it changes anything, and it doesn't. But not 16-year-olds playing Call of Duty, but say 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, they're talking about everybody in their school system, but my guess is their focus. I mean, an overwhelming 85% of their schools are primary schools, so they're 12 and below. One of the first things that came to my mind was, so are you likewise going to be notifying the police? It's one thing to notify the parents if they want to notify the parents. If the concern is, we think that your children are accessing video games, say at their friends' houses, that you may not want them to, so we're going to notify you, and you can do with that information what you want, right? I don't think it's a little odd, but it's not totally unreasonable. There's some basis in reality there, but I think the idea of notifying the police is laughable.
It's a dick move. It's a dick move.
The first thing I thought of was like, so will you also be notifying the police if you find out that a 9-year-old is watching an R-rated movie? Because essentially this is the same thing, right? R-rated movies, you're not allowed to go.
Age inappropriate.
If you're under the age of 17, but if your parents take you, you can go, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting. But what also surprised me, Brent, is that I was shocked at what I didn't see in any of these articles, which is I saw no legal representative of whatever the equivalent is of their DA's office or from the police force coming out and saying, we won't be doing anything about this. This is ridiculous. They have no legal leg to stand on here, and we won't be doing anything about this. And I was a little sort of shocked not to see that in these stories.
Do you think that this is perhaps a preemptive reactionary sort of response to a situation that hasn't happened yet, but that perhaps this school or this educational partnership feels that could happen, where somebody comes along and says, well, you guys have a responsibility. Maybe this is them responding to the thing that you just talked about with their Prime Minister, David Cameron, saying that people in positions of responsibility can be brought up on charges. Do you think that this is a direct reaction to that? Do you think that this is them basically just trying to cover their own ass?
I don't know. I mean, I have to think so, or maybe it's an opportunistic sort of attempt at taking that and turning it into some sort of, in order to manifest some dogma that the people who run this organization.
We have an agenda, and here's a perfect opportunity to jump on and get our agenda out there. Right,
with the advent of what David Cameron said. I'm not sure, Brent, but it is so... It's so laughable. It's so laughable. I mean, it's just so ridiculous that's like I often sometimes I've often been at work and people will come in sometimes in a hospital when I was working in a hospital, and people would come in and we they would come into the emergency room and we would be we'd be caring for someone who had a heart attack and they have a hurt ankle and so they have to wait, and they will quite literally call 911. And try and call an ambulance or something because they don't feel they're getting the attention they need.
I've heard this.
And 911, calls us, right? They sort of
says, hey, they don't. The guy over in bed 4B.
That's exactly right.
That's
exactly right. And that's kind of like what I feel like this is. Like, we're going to call the police. It's so laughable that I almost couldn't believe that it was here, and I'm a little surprised at sort of the lack of official reaction to it, given that it's in major publications. It's not like it's a story that's buried. It is in major publications. So
and perhaps there'll be some more reaction to it as the week goes on.
And maybe there will. I'll be looking forward to see if there is. I thought this was an interesting story that was over the line, and
it is.
And I thought it was something you might support, so I thought I would bring it up.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, and this will be kind of my final thought on, but let me just tell you the problem that I kind of have with this. The thing about this that bugs me is the fact that I can grant you a lot of things. I can grant you, okay, this educational partnership, they're concerned, they're concerned about violent video games. And of course they're educators. So who could possibly expect them to know anything about where the current scientific research? Oh, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, okay, so skipping that point though, I'll grant you that the intentions may be sincere. But the question that I have is, if your intent is to actually help the situation, then I don't understand why you chose to make this a confrontation. because it seems to me that being educators, you would understand that threats and coercion don't particularly work well in education. And so why not, as an example, if you have a child or a group of children that are playing these games, I don't understand why you don't call the parents in for a meeting and you show them video footage like, okay, look, your kids are playing this game, with this guy's head exploding after he gets hit by an RPG. Why not bring the parents in, show them the games, and voice your concerns? Say, listen, we are concerned about where this is going, and we think that if you guys are buying these games for your kids, that could be a really bad thing. We need to work together on this, as opposed to trying to bring the parents into their way of thinking and say, listen, we hope that you share our concerns about this, and we hope that you want to do something about it in conjunction with us, as opposed to doing that at the onset. They made the parents the adversary. And so now people are just going to dig in and be defensive and fight against this no matter what. And so it's just inconceivable to me that anybody sat around, discussed this, and said, yes, this is a good strategy that will help us accomplish our goals, and in no way is going to create a bunch of unnecessary infighting between educators and parents, or parents and social services or the police or whatever. It's not going to create a whole bunch of other problems that are going to draw attention away from this. That won't happen at all. So it just seems so short-sighted to me, what they're doing here.
Indeed. And let me say how much I appreciate the fact that your take on this matches essentially that of Vizzini from The Princess Bride.
Always, my friend. Always.
Inconceivable.
And never going against a Sicilian when death is on the line! Welcome back, everybody. We're going to hit the road and talk about some of the games we've been playing this week. And I'm going to go ahead and drop a massive spoiler on the table. No Star Wars Commander this time.
I'm not sure people consider that a spoiler so much as a gift.
You fucking asshole. What are you been playing?
You son of a... now you don't even care, do you?
No.
I insulted your beloved game.
Listen, that statement assumes that I cared before you insulted my game.
Well, look, so I played a couple of games this week, and no, it was not The Last of Us, which I told you I was playing 2 weeks ago and surprised you. And no, it was not The Order 1886, which I told you I was playing last week and surprised you. But
it's just...
It does include. Look, I got Bloodborne. Bloodborne has a 93 on Metacritic. Everybody was raving about it. I was at Best Buy and I said to myself, "Who are you kidding? Like you're going to buy it in 3 weeks. You might as well just get it now." So I bought it. So here's the deal. I'm about, I don't know, probably 10 hours, maybe 12 hours into the game, and I'm not sure I know how to play it yet.
Well, Lauren, let me tell you, that might be a problem.
You played the Dark Souls games, did you not?
No, not really.
You didn't play Dark Souls or Demon Souls?
No.
Okay, so Bloodborne is, for all intents and purposes, and some people are going to sort of crap their pants when I say this, but I will explain.
Let me get a towel ready.
Bloodborne is, for all intents and purposes, a carbon copy of those games.
Okay.
It is, and I say for all intents and purposes because it is not exactly the same.
Uh-huh.
There are differences in terms of the flow of the combat. There are differences in some of the ways that some of the mechanics are set up. But for the uninitiated, for those who are not hardcore Demons or Dark Souls players, you probably wouldn't know that. Because those differences are subtle enough. The game looks startlingly like Demon Souls and Dark Souls in the UI, in the art direction. As a matter of fact, one of the issues I have with the game is it doesn't seem like a visual improvement to me over the last two games,
right?
Which is surprising, and it's not. Furthermore, it's really not a performance improvement. This game has some real frame rate issues that are not a good thing in a game like this. Where Dark Souls and Demon Souls were both visually stunning, so is Bloodborne, but it doesn't look like the graphics are updated that much to me. There's some reflection on some of the street surfaces, but it looks startlingly similar, albeit, certainly like a bit of a different aesthetic in terms of it's got more of a sort of Sleepy Hollow Victorian feel to it, kinda. Yeah. And it plays very similarly. I mean, the overwhelming mechanics in the game are essentially the same. I mean, it's
permadeath,
frustratingly difficult,
all that stuff.
Yeah, permadeath in the context of permadeath. And we'll talk about that in a second. But it is very much like those games. It is, and given that, I have to say at this point, I'm surprised at the amount of affection that it's received. So the game is just like Demon Souls or Dark Souls, drops you into the game and doesn't tell you much about how to play it. There are some hints that it gives you, but certainly I had to go to the internet several times in the beginning to look up how mechanics work. I played enough of Demon Souls and Dark Souls just to know to do that. Yeah. Just to go and look something up on the internet and not like wait to try and suss it out too much in terms of some of the basic mechanics at the beginning. So I told you I'm not sure I know how to play it yet, and I was kind of half kidding. I'm really genuinely not sure if I like the game or not.
After 12 hours?
Yeah, I mean, I essentially have gotten through, for those that are playing it, I've gotten through Yharnam, and I'm in the cathedral something or other. I just beat the sort of second boss, and I'm in the cathedral. I can't remember what it's called now, which is not that far into the game at all. I mean, I played, there is a huge chunk of the game that I probably spent 5 hours replaying the same section over and over and over and over. I'm not sure, Brent, if I like the game at this point or if I'm obsessed with it, really. I can't tell. And it's some of the mechanics.
It's a thin line, isn't it?
Some of the mechanics are just insanely frustrating. So permadeath, what permadeath means in this game is so you collect what they call blood echoes, which is essentially, think of it as currency, right? Think of it as dollars or whatever, and you collect this currency, and you could use that currency to either buy equipment and upgrades or consumables like health potions, or you can use that currency to upgrade your statistics, your RPG, to make your strength better, your endurance, or whatever. When you play through Bloodborne, when you get killed, you lose all your blood echoes. You drop all your money, okay. Right? And you have one chance to get back to that money. And if you can get back to that money before you die again, you pick it up again. And it's now yours again. And if you get killed, you drop it.
Doesn't this sound like it would be a great premise for an American game show or something where, something that, would involve people and dropping money and then, I don't know, bludgeoning instruments.
Yes, I like it. One big difference between Bloodborne and the Demon's Dark Souls series is that previously you dropped your money, let's just call it, and you would go back to that place and it'd be sitting on the ground. Now, AI characters wander around and they will actually pick it up. So you can go back to where you dropped it,
you gotta
and it won't
them
be
to get
there.
Your money back.
Correct, and you got to find the one you killed.
Also, sounded like a great game show premise. Look, I'm just going to be making notes on this, okay?
The caveat is that, it doesn't sound like too big of a deal, except it can take you 20, 25, 30 minutes to get back to where you were, depending on where you were. And you run the risk of dying, all the way along. And so there's very, very, very few checkpoints in this game. I mean, checkpoints can be, an hour apart or whatever. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. And so
I got you.
It can be very frustrating. You can imagine when you're 45, 50 minutes into that hour and then you get killed. What's even more frustrating than that is when you get killed for a reason that isn't your fault, in the context of either a glitch in the game. A couple times I've gotten stuck in places you shouldn't get stuck, and I had to commit suicide, and what cost me tons of money.
That's not cool. That's not
of blood echoes, or because of frame rate issues, can be super, super frustrating. The game is segmented It's kind of hard to describe, but there's these checkpoints. But so far as I can tell at this point, the only time I have encountered new checkpoints, like you have to like illuminate the new checkpoint, is after a boss battle.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Which is super frustrating because boss battles, like there's no way you're winning a boss battle the first time around. There's just no way.
Well, I mean that is don't you think though that is kind of like the nature of the. And having not played the series, maybe
were you going to say the Beast? By the way,
maybe I'm talking out of turn, but yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of the whole point of these games is a return to kind of classic levels of video game difficulty and not getting a checkpoint right before a boss fight and all that. I mean, isn't that kind of the point?
It is. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I remember feeling this way about Demon's Souls, and then eventually learning to love it. And like I said, I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm just describing it at this point. This is what I'm saying can be frustrating, but it's also conversely what is so rewarding about it. After about 10 or 12 hours, I'm starting to understand the game much better, and I'm playing it differently from the outset. I'm being smarter about it. It took me several hours into the game to realize don't let yourself get to the point of having so much money that you would be really pissed off if you died. At that point, go back to the beginning, spend that money on upgrading your stuff for yourself. So if you do die, you're not going to lose your shit because you just lost something you've worked on for an hour.
I like the idea of turn the difficulty into an excuse to just play differently. Change your strategy in order to compensate. I like that approach.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I've only scratched
about it like you were a second ago.
I've only scratched the surface to this game, and so there's so many more mechanics that I just discovered blood gems, and I can see all sorts of mechanics.
Blood gems.
Gems,
gotcha. Gems, because I was like, dude, Blood Jams is the name of this fucking game show right here.
That's right. So I have there's tabs in your like the RPG piece of it, where your stats are and your items and all that like I can see I'm not going to get to for another 10 hours.
Yeah.
So I am alternatively enjoying and hating the game. The one thing that's sort of odd about the game is that is something that we've talked about before relative to video games, Brent, which I think is almost antithetical to game enjoyment, and that is repetition. And one of the at the core of this game, it is built on repetition, and I just don't know if that's a good thing or not. Mm-hmm. Difficulty is one thing. Repetition. I mean, you go back and all the enemies are in the same place so far, anyway. And it's eventually what took you an hour the first time takes you 35 minutes after the 10th time and takes you 10 minutes after the 30th time.
But again,
right?
I mean, to me, that seems like that could be a very intentional choice. I mean, again, think back to, classic gaming.
Oh, it's
Mega Man.
It's a very intentional choice.
Learning the patterns, learning the patterns of like, where enemies show up and things like that. That's a pretty core element of classic, gaming difficulty. And it seems to me that would be the one maybe kind of mitigating factor in, okay, yeah, you died, you lost an hour worth of gameplay, you got to start all over here, but where everybody's going to be now. The places where you need to avoid, the places where you can get through quick. And so it seems to me that could be kind of a balancing factor in the other things that make the game really difficult. I mean, if it was really difficult on top of everything randomizes and changes up every time you die, so you're going back in and you have no idea where things are, I mean, would you be just as frustrated by how seemingly more difficult that would be?
I don't know. I would have to play it, to be honest with you, because and I say that only in the context of if you asked me about Bloodborne or Demon's Souls or Dark Souls, it is not a game. It's unlike any other games I've ever played. All those three games, and so I could talk about them thinking I knew, but I wouldn't until I played it. So that's been my experience with Bloodborne. I mean, I've wanted to throw my controller across the room, and I have felt really great accomplishment. And I think that's the nature of that game. And I can't tell you yet if I like it or not. I almost sold it. and I'm dying to play it as soon as we get done recording.
That is quite a dichotomy.
Yes.
All right.
So I will report to you more over the coming weeks and see how it changes next week. I am interested to see how it changes for me.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about it. Anyway, moving on to Shadow of Mordor. I've finally kind of, between the time when Z goes to bed and when she gets up, kind of leveling off a little bit, and me just sort of carving out some time in there to play some games while she's asleep. I've managed to do pretty well this past week, and I'm hoping this is going to be a continuing trend moving forward. And I used the time that I had to go ahead and finish off Shadow of Mordor, which I've been threatening to do for a long time now. But I'm done. I finally finished. Well, I say I'm done. I'm finished with the story. I have completed the main story missions in the game. I hardly have touched any of the side content because I felt like I needed to stay focused on the main story, or I wasn't going to get through it. And you,
Yes.
having played the game, you know how much side content there is, how much there's side quests, and there's all kinds of challenges and things like that. And you can dive into that rabbit hole and not come out.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I finished the main game. I talked about last week how I was kind of re-energized, having gotten over that kind of mid-game hump, and gotten into the second major area of the game, the second map area, and the mechanics of that area involve having to brand war chieftains, but really you're branding Uruk captains and then, manipulating things to get them to become war chiefs. That part of the game is by far my favorite. And I wish that there had been a bit more of that in the first section of the game, because, you were just talking about repetition, and the first part of the game got really, really repetitive to me, and actually led me to put it down for a little while. But that section was so satisfying, and I was really, really kicking ass all through that. And every Uruk captain, every Uruk I would come across, I would brand. Like, I basically stopped killing. I just started branding everybody I came across. And it's interesting how it changed combat, but also the mechanics of just dealing with Uruk captains fighting each other, being promoted. All of those things are going on in the Nemesis system. It just changed the entire game for me. And I absolutely loved all of the kind of the strategy and machinations between, all right, so I've turned this Orc captain. I've got this guy now, and I'm going to set him to murder a couple of these lower tier captains that aren't as strong as he is. And that's going to make him a little bit stronger. And then I'm going to send him after, okay, so I've got this war chief. He's got 3 bodyguards. I'm going to turn one of these bodyguards, and then the other 2, I'm going to sick this other Orc captain that I've been kind of leveling up. I'm going to sick him on those other 2, and we're just going to kill them. All of the things that it unlocked in the way of strategy, I was just eating up. I absolutely loved it, and it just really cemented why the Nemesis system is, for me, I think it's one of the most important game mechanic developments that I've seen maybe in a console generation. I mean, it's really, really innovative and super fun. Having said all that,
yes,
once I got all 5 of those war chiefs branded, once I've got my Orc army basically built up, and you're ready to move into the in-game content, I found it really anticlimactic. It felt like it was just building and building and building and building up to what really didn't amount to much. You've got a skirmish with some other orcs. You've got kind of a pre-boss fight, another skirmish with some orcs, and then you're at the end boss fight, and the end boss fight was over in minutes. And it really wasn't difficult.
Yes.
And I found that really disappointing. I understand in terms of the game engine and everything that they really probably can't, like, you can't do 300 orcs on the battlefield all at the same time and you just, working your way through them, as I would love to see happen. I understand that just limitations on what the hardware can accomplish, and that's not realistic. So the scale has to be, the scale has to be reduced, and that's fine. I can deal with that. But it just felt like the boss fight. I mean, the boss fights were just way too easy for my taste. There was just nothing to them, and I wanted a challenge. Going after, like, honestly, like, probably the hardest stuff in the game is going after orc captains in strongholds when you first start out. So before you really have like a lot of upgraded abilities and things that you can rely on, and before you've really figured out how you can use other orc captains and things like that to your advantage. I mean, before then, like, taking out orcs in strongholds, that's stressful stuff. And I wanted that. Like, I wanted it to feel like, yeah, I'm a lot better, but the stakes are higher too. And I wanted more of a challenge than I got. And so I was ultimately disappointed by that aspect of it. But up until then, I was just relishing in everything I was doing.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't, the challenge piece of it didn't bother me, because I enjoyed fighting so much that I frequently found myself I thought the mechanic was so well done that I frequently found myself just roaming, looking for fights.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't like, I didn't really have any buy into the story. And I think how I feel in general about boss fights. And so I certainly wasn't looking for, for more, more boss fights. I thought it was quite well balanced, actually, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And I agree with you in this, like, in terms of the story. There's nothing here that's terribly remarkable in terms of storytelling. It's pretty straightforward. There's a couple of kind of surprise things that happened that didn't really change all that much for me or really get me all that excited. So I kind of felt the story was so-so. It wasn't bad. It was just mediocre, I guess. But that's fine. No problem with that. But just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, the mini boss fight, I'm going to go into a little bit of spoilers here, just so you know. So if you haven't played the game, maybe you want to skip ahead a couple minutes. But the boss fight with the tower, which is the first thing that the first boss fight that you kind of have prior to, the actual end game boss fight. But the boss fight with the tower, you're in an empty stronghold, and the guy is just like warping around, and you're just sneaking along, coming up behind him and branding him from, doing a stealth brand. I mean, it's just, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. And to me, it would have been much more interesting if that stronghold had been filled with orcs. Like, let's say, like they have their main force outside and they're fighting your orc war chiefs, but they've closed the gates. And so there's still a contingent inside. And so he's warping around. He'll disappear from this place and reappear somewhere over here. But the gag to that is, okay, so now he's in this place. So you go in, you use all the tricks that you know to drive the orcs out of that area. You drop a nest of Morgul flies. You let loose some Caragors. You blow up some barrels, whatever. You drive some of the orcs out of that area so it's not so heavily populated, and then you go in and you stealth brand him. Okay, now he warps to a new area where there are orcs. So now you got to go in and you have to try to get the orcs out of the area and everything, and it at least builds upon the established game mechanics and make it more of a challenge than it was. I mean, that was nothing. It's just, I stealth branded him and now he disappears. He's over here now. Climb up this wall, creep across this rope, drop down, stealth brand him again. Okay, let's do that 5 more times. It was almost laughable.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that assessment. It didn't bother me with what I was looking for from the game. Mm-hmm. For me, it kept the game moving, which is sort of what I wanted a little bit.
I wanted it to be over.
But no. I appreciate games that don't come come to screeching halts. I find that to be not conducive to that sensation of forward motion, personally. Well, but I totally get where you're coming from.
Yes,
Brent,
and I understand that point you're making. I mean, I've certainly experienced what you're talking about in other games. It just didn't have to be my experience here.
Yeah, no. And I understand that, but it still is. It's a great game. It's tons of fun to play.
It is. I think that actually just playing it now, like through, like, you know, kind of like an after game content, just going through the world and doing side missions and things like that would actually be really, really fun, because that's that meat and potatoes part of the game is what really I remember most fondly.
Right. Well, I'm glad you actually finished it. Finished a game and finished it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's the first thing I've finished since, God, man, Ether 1, Stick of Truth. I can't remember which of those came last.
Well, that will change come June time, assuming Batman actually comes out.
Yes.
So, next up on my list, Brent, in stark contrast to Bloodborne, which, as I told you, I've had a love-hate relationship with, maybe a little more hate than love, is a little game I like to call Titanfall.
Yeah, I was surprised that I was surprised this was on the list. I was surprised to see you coming back to this.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks in a row I've surprised you. Titanfall is a game that came out in March of 2014, which actually surprised me because I thought it was a lot more than a year ago. When I was in Brazil, I bought the game. I really enjoyed it, but I struggled to play it because my ping was so high from Brazil, and all the people I were playing with was in the United States, and the time differences. So I wasn't, the only reason I stopped playing it was because of that. I had tons of fun with this game. And recently, EA made the expansion pack, all the expansion packs available for free.
Right.
And so I had downloaded them, and I decided to, now that I'm back in the United States and I've got a good, reliable, high-speed connection back up, and my pings are, you know, closer to those that I play with, I decided to give it another shot. And man, let me tell you, Titanfall is a brilliant game. It is a supremely well-designed, brilliant game that is just tons and tons of fun, ear-to-ear grins the whole time I was playing. Regardless of the fact that I was finishing at the bottom in every game, I still, which tells you something about the game. It's just the parkour is so well done. Switching between being a pilot, just being on foot, and being in a Titan. It is a really, really well done multiplayer game, and I am so glad to be playing it again. I just had where Bloodborne was like just this constant sort of fuck you to the game to get through it. Titanfall could not have been more opposite. It was just sheer and pure video gaming joy, just fun, having fun. And it's so well done. And I'm really, really glad that they're doing Titanfall 2, which they announced recently. I hope that they... I can't wait to see what the improvements are. I hope one of them is to allow people on the PC to build their own servers, because I really would like to play more than just attrition, which is what everybody seems to be playing, which is essentially just team deathmatch.
Yeah.
But it's just tons of fun, Brent. Titanfall is tons of fun, and I intend to continue to play more. The weapons feel great. Everything feels great about that game. I really, really enjoy it.
I believe you. And I believe you because having played Titanfall in the beta, I had a pretty good time with it too. I thought it was really fun. It wasn't anything that I felt compelled enough to invest in just because I didn't have any illusions about having the time to actually play with friends or anything. But I also really, really enjoyed playing it and thought that it was just the pacing and the mechanics and everything were so well tuned for having fun that it'd be an easy game to get into. I'm curious to see how... You know, because they've announced that the sequel is going to be multi-platform, as we all, I think, anticipated it would be. So I'm pretty interested to see how that goes over when people over in the PlayStation camp can get their hands on it too. I imagine it's gonna go over quite well.
I would imagine so, and certainly it will. You know, obviously it will do well for their sales. I'm sure.
Sure, I'm sure they're not going to be. I'm sure they're not going to be hurting.
Yeah, so if you haven't played Titanfall yet, I think you can pick it. You can pick it up for like $20 now or something. Yeah. I highly encourage you to do so.
All right.
Yeah. Now, what's this, Brent? What's this? The last game on the docket is I was playing Titanfall or something else recently, right, and my little Steam overlay popped up. Brent Adams is now playing Skyrim. To which I was like, "What?
Does not compute."
No, something must be wrong here.
You know how sometimes you'll watch something or play something and you get to the end and you're not quite ready to be done with it, or sometimes it'll just like naturally lead you into something else. Like, as an example, anytime I watch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is on TV, fairly frequently, a few times a year.
As it should be.
Yes. Anytime I watch Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I inevitably have to go and watch All the President's Men after I've seen Butch Cassidy. And then after I've seen All the President's Men, I want to go and watch Sneakers.
Okay.
And it's kind of like that, I guess. I got finished with Shadow of Mordor, and something about the fantasy aspects and everything, and the fact that I didn't particularly care about the story or whatever, but something about just the fantasy setting and the fantasy aspects of it. I was playing the game and kind of thinking to myself, it'd be kind of cool if you could upgrade your armor and maybe because some of the orc armor that they have in the game is kind of cool looking, and I was like, it'd be interesting if you could take weapons off guys and maybe use like an axe instead of a sword. Just thinking about those kinds of things, and so I finished the game and I was like, I kind of would like to have a little bit of a game experience like this, but that was just focused on some different things. And I got to thinking about Skyrim, and I'd been talking about Skyrim recently with a friend of mine who was, telling me about what they're doing with the mods on Skyrim. And, they've got, I don't know, like 4 dozen mods installed for the game and all the different things that have happened with it, since Bethesda has kind of, I guess, released their final patch for it and all that kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? I always wanted to check out Skyrim on PC with mods. I own it on PC. Never really played it all that much on PC. And so I thought, you know what? I'll just start noodling around with this. And so I re-downloaded Skyrim and installed it. And I've just been basically dicking around with mods. I haven't really played the game all that much, but I've just been installing a bunch of different stuff, for to change like weather, to do things with the lighting, enhancements to the flora. One of the really cool ones is this one called I think it's called Pure Waters. That and then there's like a companion one for like Pure Water Falls. But anyway, they're just like an enhancement to the way that water looks in the game, the way waterfalls and things like that look in the game, and like some of the stuff. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how much of a qualitative difference it can make. And of course, now I've got like the high res texture pack DLC and everything that Bethesda put out. But yeah, I've just been I've been like over like on the Nexus Mods site, just going through and getting stuff, and people are sending me lists like, oh, here's the mods that I use, and so like I've got a couple of lists from friends of all the mods that they use, and a couple from listeners, and I'm just going through and just kind of trying stuff out. And I thought, what I really want to move on to right now is Alien Isolation. Like that's the next thing on my backlog that I really want to tick off. But I think that Skyrim is going to be kind of like my hobby game that I'm just going to be playing. I'm just going to be playing here and there on a regular basis for the next year, install a bunch of mods, get things kind of tweaked the way I want, and then just, go through and just play the game in fits and spurts and see where it kind of leads me.
Talk about a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know. But that's the thing. Like, I know it's a rabbit hole. And I know that if I start playing that game and decide, okay, I want to finish the main story quest, like to me, like that's almost impossible. Like it seems almost impossible to do that. And so like I feel like my strategy has to be, I'll nibble around the edges until I'm at the center, but I won't have any kind of ambition about doing it quickly.
That's what everybody says about the first time they use crack.
So anyway,
I'm just kidding. I mean, at least that's what I said. Yeah. So anyway, all right, that's dude. It. With some good games, some big games this week, and with that, I think it is time to call it a show and turn it over to our listeners. As usual, of course, we want to hear what you guys think about everything that we talked about this week, whether it was Skyrim or Titanfall, Shadow of Mordor, or Bloodborne. I know our activity feed has just been inundated with Bloodborne posts, and so I'm sure people will have some comments about that, and I would love to hear them. Likewise, what we talked about up in the clubhouse, calling the cops on your kids, on parent people's kids for playing Call of Duty. And what we talked about in the garage, Steven Spielberg to direct Ready Player One. Also, the announcement of Ernie Klein's newest book coming July 14th, Armada, as well as the PlayStation 4 update that brings the suspend resume function, Halo 5 Guardians, Wolfenstein's new DLC, and the 7.5 minutes of absolutely stunningly gorgeous, super exciting, and very titillating gameplay from Batman Arkham Knight. As usual, he is Brent Adams. I am Lauren Baumgarten. And remember, guys, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.